Look, Tweety, a new podcast just dropped. Time to sit back and relax with a nice martini for this one.
Supervising producer on Looney Tunes Cartoons and The Day the Earth Blew Up is in studio here to talk about all of it with me on the podcast today. So, of course, you realize this means podcast.
Are you ready, eager young space cadets?
Meep, meep. I call Porky Pig.
That is the limit!
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
Firstly, I wanted to thank my patrons for helping make this show happen. And if you'd like to donate, check the show notes. There's always some exclusives going on over there, including Patreon questions, which we have some for today. So be sure to give that a click. The Day the Earth Blew Up marks the first ever fully animated original Looney Tunes theatrical released feature. So, of course, we're going to get into it with supervisor producer Alex Kirwan. Alex, welcome to the show. And how are you doing today?
Greetings. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much, John. Great to finally talk to you on mic.
Great to finally have you. I think we've been talking about getting you on the show for 5 years now.
I think about 5 years. It seems about right.
It has been a lofty journey, but one that is well earned.
Thank you very much.
You have touched one of the precious IPs of our time, Looney Tunes. That is such a milestone moment and must feel like some sort of accomplishment on your end to have produced, I don't know how many shorts, but I count it as 8 seasons. And I know that's different from Max, but Max has like lumped in 30 episodes in one season and, you know, like 11, 8, like it's all over the place. So I'm calling it 8 seasons.
The streaming world is weird. We just make them
Yes.
and they release them however they want to release them. I asked once how many seasons we were, the shows we were making were considered, and they said, it's 1 season. And I'm like, we're making 1,000 minutes of Looney Tunes and that's just 1 season? They're like, yes. I think we count. I think we made 207 shorts.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is to us too.
But you also included in that 4 specials. You have a back to school special, a Christmas, Halloween, and Valentine's Day special, which
Yes.
all had a number of shorts within those,
Yep.
and interstitials that were live action. I believe like there was
Yeah.
live action
Yep.
elements, and like mind blowing. This has been the most excited I've ever been about a Looney Tunes project. So thank you, and Pete Brownguard.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, Pete Brownguard,
Yeah.
the brains behind it all. I was just there to help him, but yes, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. I mean, like, look,
I know.
I have them behind
you
me.
You got Yellow Gloves Bugs behind you. And also, I saw the back of your jacket earlier, and that's, I think that's Elmer's Pet Rabbit bugs on your jacket, which is also Yellow Gloves Bugs. So that makes me very, very happy.
It is. I had to represent classic old school Merry Melodies on this hoodie. And, you know, I don't work for Warner Brothers, but I might as well. I support them everywhere I go. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. I got mine going too. I got my
Oh, love it. Love to see it. Bugs on the classic Warner Brothers logo. We're just showing off our hoodies, people
yes,
who
Bugs
can't see
hoodies.
anything.
Guess this isn't a visual medium necessarily, but
Exactly. Unless you join our Patreon, where it can
I guess
be.
that's true.
So I wanted to quickly just give a huge, huge time to devote to the beloved animator who recently passed away, who worked on this movie, Bob McKnight.
Yes.
You and I had conversations with him. I'm so glad that he saw the final movie. This guy had such a legendary track record for animation. He worked with Looney Tunes multiple times. Looney Tunes Show, Looney Tunes Back in Action, DuckTales the movie, Toy Story. He did some character work, and the Tigger movie. I mean, like, some monumental milestones there. what was it like working with him? And do you have any fun stories around his experience on this movie?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm so happy you brought him up because I feel like his legacy isn't as well known as it should be. Bob McKnight was an incredible artist. When we started doing the shorts, we didn't have him in the beginning, and he was. There was a certain point where we knew we needed him. There's only so many people who can still draw in this style in a way that looks like like it was from that era, and it's not, a bunch of young people trying to draw in that style. Like he's worked in like consumer products for years. He's if you have like a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt or something like that, odds are that he drew it. But his drawings just oozed appeal, and he was one of a couple artists that still worked on paper. We would have someone, some studios don't like to accommodate that because it's a complicated pipeline. Someone has to be hired to scan the drawings, but we were like, no, it's worth it. It's worth it to have this guy drawing on paper and making these characters look like the way that they're supposed to look and feeling cute and volumetric and Bob was a real character. I mean, we loved him to death. The guy could talk your ear off. He loved to talk. I understand a lot of Warner Brothers productions, they would hire him, but they wouldn't necessarily have him in-house because he was known for slowing productions down because he loved to chat with people so much.
Such a youthful spirit.
Yeah, and he had all these obsessions, and he drew his drawings were just so incredibly effortless, but it almost wasn't the drawing that he loved to talk about. He loved the technical aspects of animation. He loved cameras and drawing desks and peg holes and registrations and field guides, and he could talk about the types of pegs that different studios would use to register the paper that the drawings were on, and the Fleischer studios used a 4-peg system from this year. He loved talking about that stuff so much. He would bring it up almost every time you would talk to him, and to me that's just indicative of, I don't know, just he loved the process so much. He loved every aspect of the animation process, and drawing was just one part of it, but he was masterful at it.
That's
and
so magical.
For our movie, which again, like you just mentioned, I'm so happy he got to see it before he passed. He was at that LA premiere. He contributed so much to that movie. Basically, he drew the final model sheets of the main characters of Porky, Daffy, and Petunia. We had a lot of artists who were drawing layouts of those characters, but he did the final model sheets that everybody was following, and he completely designed the villain character, the invader, from scratch. That's
oh my gosh.
a 100% Bob McKnight character design. So I mean, the reason this movie looks the way it does is completely because of Bob. So it's a huge loss to Looney Tunes, and it's a huge loss to the industry as well.
Yeah, and I felt it important to give some light to his bright spirit that was here with us, that was always breathing life into all these characters that we know and love, and he continued the legacy that was started back in the 40s that you guys reinvigorated within us when we watched the new shorts. So let's pour out one for him, and keep his thoughts with us every time we see this movie, and just know that we should be celebrating Bob McKnight for his contributions to the art form of animation in general, but specifically for all the Looney Tunes greatness that we've had. And
absolutely,
I'm so glad that you guys got him onto the project. I'm glad he was free.
Yeah. Yeah, I that the timing worked out was great.
So let's jump back a bit to your career, and how does it feel to having produced such a well-established IP, and what struggles did you and Pete face when crafting new Looney Tunes cartoons?
I mean, it's the thrill of a lifetime. Absolutely. Cartoons, classic animation are incredibly important to me. I know, for so many people, they say I grew up with these cartoons, and that is true. I did grow up with these cartoons. But I literally had these cartoons projected over my crib as an infant. My dad is also a huge animation fan, and he's a film collector. And I received my first education about these cartoons, as a very young child, because he wasn't just exposing them to me and showing me, at that time when I was very young, you could only see them on Saturday morning or whatever, but he could show me a lot of the shorts that were hard to see, or from eras that didn't get put into distribution very often. And then he also could tell me about the people who made them and what their skill sets were. And we had a shelf full of books about Tex Avery and Chuck Jones. And so I talk about knowing that these cartoons were made by people. It wasn't, I know for a lot of people, it's sort of an abstraction. They were, in their late teens when they sort of realized, like, oh, people make these things. And I guess I could too. But the fact that they were crafted by these artists was part of the interest, and sort of trying to pick up on the style and think about how they were made was very interesting to me. I know Pete has a similar experience. It was his brother who kind of he had an older brother who knew a lot about animation, how it was made. So I revere all classic animation, but I definitely Looney Tunes is on a pedestal high above almost all of it, because it was funny. That stuff, the Disney cartoons are beautiful, but the Warner Brothers cartoons made you laugh out loud.
Yeah.
For lots of different reasons. And when Pete Brownguard approached me to work on the shorts, I was terrified. I wanted to turn him down. I went home that night and told my wife, like, I can't do this, because I don't want to anger the cartoon gods. I don't want to I don't want to mess this up. And she was like, well, that's the reason why you should be a part of it, is because you know what's important about it. And Pete had asked me, when I first met with him, he said he wanted me to be a tastemaker on the series. He knew I loved old cartoons, and the more I talked to him, the more I realized what he wanted to do with them, which was kind of not change the formula at all. He loved, his favorite Looney Tunes shorts were from the same era that were my favorite, sort of mid-40s, the kind of World War II era shorts, which are kind of the wildest, craziest, highest energy version of Looney Tunes.
Rich with humor.
Yes. Just they're the most extreme, and kind of they're the looniest Looney Tunes.
Zaniest.
Yes.
All across the board.
Wackiest. So I knew that was his favorite. He wanted to draw the inspiration from that, but he also didn't want to change the format, and he didn't want to set out to change them. I know, our Looney Tunes have a distinct flavor, but we always had the attitude of, like, let's not set out to reinvent it. Let's try to learn what works about the shorts. Let's learn the mechanics of the classic shorts, try to make more of that, and then our own sensibilities will kind of come through it, which is kind of what I feel like the original directors did. They were all interpreting each other's work, but they all, a Chuck Jones cartoon has a different flavor than a Bob Clampett cartoon or a McKimson cartoon. And so,
for sure.
So we didn't set out with like, okay, well, this is going to be our twist on it, or this is how we're going to update it for today. We're like, let's just try really hard to make really funny cartoons and use the characters in the same way that they did in the classic run. And that was sort of you were asking what sort of the biggest challenge. I mean, there were so many challenges, but I think really trying to analyze what worked about the classic shorts, like where does the comedy come from? Why do you use certain characters together and not certain other characters? What sort of a situation is one of the characters funny in, but one of the other characters is not funny in? Why does this premise work better with Yosemite Sam as the villain instead of Elmer Fudd as the villain? Or why would you pair Daffy with Elmer Fudd in this short instead of Porky Pig? It's kind of those sort of like nuances. It's just figuring out like, oh, this is where the comedy's going to come from here. And it was sort of just very much getting, down to basics. Like what when you're writing a premise for Daffy Duck, like what is it you want to see him doing, and how do you reverse engineer a premise that is going to exploit that?
Yeah, I felt,
and it all seems obvious in retrospect, but it took us a little while to sort of figure out how to do that.
For sure, I felt the Daffy ones, and Daffy and Porky for sure felt the truest to their source material, and you guys had such inspired stories that you were pulling from. I mean, the catastrophe one comes to mind where he pulls out the chainsaw and is like ready to chop Porky up, and it's just so zany, but also it felt in line with those late 30s, early 40s cartoons that you're talking about, that was from that era that went there. And I feel like you guys did a lot to preserve that feeling. And so, like, whenever I watch these, I'm like,
Thank you.
Finally, like, somebody, gets what it felt like to watch Looney Tunes back in the day. So finding the team and finding Jim Soper, who brought in these new renditions of the characters, how hard was it assembling the right team for these?
It took a little bit. It was really fun because it was such an eclectic group. I mean, Jim Soper, I think of him as our young guy. He draws in a way that looks like it's plucked right out of 1937, but he's he's a lot younger than I am and hadn't worked much in animation. Pete found him on Instagram and famously called Jim Soper up and said, I'm calling on behalf of Warner Brothers. We would like you to do some work on a Looney Tunes series. And Jim Soper said, this is the phone call I've been waiting for my entire life.
Oh my God.
But he understands, the construction of those characters and the spirit and what's funny about that style of cartoon so much. But then we had elder statesmen like Bob McKnight or Dan Haskett, people who have been drawing these characters for decades and were excited by what we were doing. I mean, I think, we got in there, we're like, well, we should reach out to some of the older generation, but are they going to get, they've been doing all these other versions of the characters. Are they going to get what it is that we're trying to get out of the characters? Of course they did. I don't even know why we would have second-guessed that, but they were excited. They were huge Looney Tunes fans, and they were really excited to do stuff that felt like, the 1940s and stuff that was as pushed as, those 40s shorts were. And so those guys got to really sort of cut loose, and the rest of us who have worked in animation for, I've worked in animation almost 30 years, but I've worked in a lot of different styles. I've worked in a lot of very flat styles. So it was very much kind of back to school, like having to train myself how to draw that dimensionally and that fluidly again. And it was very freeing and exciting, once I kind of felt warmed up, and was doing it on a regular basis.
I mentioned this on Eric Bows's post on Instagram whenever he uploaded a clip from the movie, but every frame looks just so immaculately done, and it's a sight to behold to see just fluid animation happening in the 2D spectrum, which we don't get anymore. The last 2D big theatrical release was Princess and the Frog, and that was 2009. That was a long time ago. I've heard you talk about the fact that when you turn these in to the studio, they sent back a message saying, "Oh no, we wanted the new ones.
Yes.
These are the old ones."
That felt great.
That kind of, I bet, because like mission accomplished, right? But I gotta say, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm holding up the collector's choice, the full volume 1 through 4, and they have Elmer Fudd here, drawn by Jim Soper. I'm assuming that's Jim's drawing for Elmer. Still fooling people.
It's weird.
Because I imagine they were told to pull classic models, and they pulled one of the new ones. And
they asked us to do a style guide for consumer products based on our series, so we gave them a lot of art from the series, and the idea being like, okay, well, they'll create merchandise for our show, and there was a little bit, and I still see merchandise using that style guide, but I also see like all the style guides seem to be shuffled together. A lot of the licensees seem to just shuffle the deck of all the style guides, and we'll use this one and this one, and it does kind of drive me crazy. It's just like, that's our Elmer and a Looney Tunes show, Charlie Dog, and it's a Bugs Bunny with the self-lined white eyes. That's like a totally different style, but I don't know. I probably do a lot of people. It's Looney Tunes are Looney Tunes. So I mean, I guess that feels good that our stuff is mixed in and people don't know the difference, but we can tell. Yeah,
it made the cut either way. But I mean, I know you and I have bought a lot of that merchandise ourselves.
We have.
And I am unapologetic whenever I wear the new stuff out, and I'm always telling people to go watch it because it's worth watching and it's really great.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about getting away with this because it feels like a crime. You guys have like put yellow gloves back on Bugs Bunny, and then you took away Elmer's gun, and you just went forward with it. You were like, you know what? That's not going to stop us. We're just going to, have him have a scythe or, have him have an axe or whatever. And he still chased Bugs Bunny or Dynamite. Like Dynamite Dance was really a fantastic calling card that let people know, hey, this is coming back and it's here and we're going to enjoy it. If you don't know, Dynamite Dance was a quick 30-second short. I believe it's a short. It felt like a promo, but it was a short that stars...
It was the first thing we released.
Yeah. Elmer and Bugs.
And that was our first time working with Tonic DNA, incredible animation studio who
Love Tonic
animated a large portion of the Day the Earth Blew Up, but they did an incredible job on that Dynamite Dance. Well, yeah, so I mean... this was a crazy experience. It was like no experience I've ever had in the animation industry before. And I don't want to speak out of school, but so normally when you work on a show, there's something called standards and practices, which is the department that sort of they sanitize what they make sure that you don't do anything that's imitatable behavior, or they kind of tell you if a joke you did is too violent or a little too edgy and kind of they do a lot of sort of tinkering with everything you do, and that's every show I've ever worked on. That's sort of been the case. You do your ideal version of it, and it's presented to this department who kind of says kind of where you went too far and this is maybe not appropriate for our audience or or what have you, and then you go back and you kind of water down your material for air.
But I've got to wonder. So Looney Tunes would have bumped up against that with every short that came out in the 40s.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's famously many things they got away with that, and there's the instances I've heard of shorts that had to be censored or walked back. There's at least one Bob McKnight cartoon I can think of where they actually made him reanimate the ending. It was too I think that's Hair Ribbon. It had too gruesome of an ending. The ending is still incredibly dark and gruesome, but just slightly less than before. But anyway, so we made these shorts. We started making them. We had this mandate to make 1,000 minutes of shorts, but we didn't know where they were going yet. Warner Brothers hadn't sold them anywhere, and Max didn't exist yet. So we didn't know where they were. Are these going to be on YouTube? Are they going to be on Netflix? Are they going to be on Amazon Prime? We didn't know. And what I think I put together, this is my interpretation of it later. Normally, it's the network that is going to air the material that pays for the standards and practices. But because we didn't have a network yet, there kind of wasn't any standards and practices. So we just kind of self-policed and did what they did in the classic shorts. We did things that made ourselves laugh.
Sure.
And and there's only a couple times an executive had to kind of walk us back. And then when we were sold to Max, then they brought in a standards practices department. But basically, and there was a couple of shirts they had us add in seat belts. That wasn't too hard to do. But basically it was, all right, these are the shorts we made. Either they're already made, we can't afford to go back into them. Either you air them or you don't air them. And they decided to air the vast majority of them. There was only, I think, there's maybe around a half dozen that they pulled. We're still hoping those manifest somewhere. You may have seen some of them at a screening. We screened a few of them in Hollywood.
I did, yeah. Animationist Film Festival, before the premiere of the Day the Earth Blew Up, they had a kind of like a sampling of Looney Tunes cartoons, but they included the unaired ones. To my surprise,
yeah.
I don't know if you were told beforehand that was going to happen, or if that's what you snuck in there.
No, we were told let's show some stuff people haven't seen, so we put a few of those in there. Yeah.
So I actually have a list. So we had there was a Sick as a Hare, one of my favorites. It had
first ones we did.
Bugs Bunny pretending to be sick so Elmer would not eat him, and that one was given the kibosh that you can't air that because COVID and because somebody coughed.
Well, I think it was just that we premiered very early in the pandemic, and the idea people being sick wasn't viewed as being very funny at that moment in time. Now, we had started making this cartoon several years before that, so we could have never anticipated that. And I don't think it's as sensitive of an issue anymore.
Right.
But the idea, it was supposed to be in our premiere episode, and the idea of, premiering our series with Bugs feigning a severe flu, it didn't go over well. So there's a few things like that were technicalities. But this was really, and there's a couple great ones in there that I wish people could see. But in a weird way, this seemed like a better way to do it, rather than kind of going through and watering down the series as a whole. Just kind of like, well, let's set these aside and maybe they'll show up somewhere later. But the rest of these will go basically the way you guys conceive them. And I think that's great because they do have a little bit of an edge to them. And I think that's what the classic shorts were. The classic shorts, especially in that Clampett era, they were a little bit dangerous. They were made for adult audiences. Kids enjoyed them, but they were made to entertain adults, and they were pushing boundaries and pushing the edges and seeing what they could get away with. And so, we did a little of that too, and I think a lot of people were excited to see Looney Tunes with a little bit of an edge to it again. But
I love that edge.
I was just going to loop back. So the only caveat really Warner Brothers had, because they said no, we realized we weren't going to have standards and practices, but there was a discussion early on where they said, well, maybe you don't lean into the gun stuff so much. Pete had this brilliant idea that they asked us if we wanted to test screen anything that we were making. And he said, well, when was the last time you test screened the classic shorts? And they were like, oh, I don't know if we did that. So he's like, all right. So he picked a selection of classic shorts and showed them to kids and moms. Just let's see what a modern audience thinks of these things. And everybody was delighted. The kids couldn't believe how surreal and imaginative they were, because there's a lot of modern shows aren't like that. And the violence, like the kids got the joke, like, oh, the coyote blows up, but the joke is he's not dead in the next scene. But the only thing audiences sort of bumped up against was, like, kids didn't like the guns. Pete picked one, maybe Easter Yeggs. It's a short with a lot of guns in it.
That does have a lot of guns in it.
Now look at here, you juvenile delinquent. Ooh, he broke my widow arm. He broke my widow arm. Ooh, the bad rabbit broke my widow arm.
And guns mean something different. I have kids, they have lockdown drills where they have to, it's like an earthquake drill, but you have to, get on your desk and imagine that there's an active shooter on the campus. So that's kind of a modern day kids' association with guns. It's not as funny to them. So we made that compromise. We're like, okay, we'll find a way to do it without guns, but we'll still try to make these things as insanely violent as we can find a way to do. But it's kind of all fantasy violence. But we learned it's pretty tough to, like, Elmer Fudd without a gun it's pretty hard to make Elmer Fudd threatening when he's not holding a firearm. We gave him a lot of axes and scythes and daggers and things like that. But that's what makes Elmer Fudd dangerous, is that shotgun. We did end up. They allowed us to use it in a couple shorts eventually. His shotgun does show up. So.
I did see that at the later end of the season, or series rather. But again, if you're listening and you wanted Elmer to have a gun the whole time, write to your congressman or congresswoman, because it's up to the Senate to change what's going on in schools, not cartoons.
I agree. I agree. It was a bummer when that came out, because we got, that got picked up by conservative media. Yeah. And the sort of like, they're censoring the Looney Tunes. And I was like, oh no, we've given this impression that we're the conservative Looney Tunes, when in fact, I think we're some of the most violent Looney Tunes that have ever been made.
Misconstrued media right there.
Yes.
Leaving the standards and practices, but I do want to highlight one more. A Hard Pill to Swallow was a Wile E. Coyote short that was absolutely hysterical, and I cannot wait for people to see it. But unfortunately, it has him taking some pills, a la the earthquake pills. I mean, it was just basically an homage to that.
Yeah, it's kind of canon.
I guess
you
can't do that now. However, I really hope it gets through one day, because it is hysterical, and it has some really great frames in there that are just like, I would love to have that as a background somewhere or something.
That's a great one.
But the way you guys translated Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner to the modern era, brilliant. I love the ideas behind them, and I know it was storyboard driven, but I felt like those teams really fired on all cylinders, and they really ate their carrots for that.
Yes. Yeah, those are so fun to write.
Oh, I bet. So casting the tunes, legacy tune voice cast, you have obviously the old guard with Candy Milo, who has been there since Tiny Toons and, Granny taking over for June Foray, and then you have
Bob Bergen.
You have Bob Bergen as Porky in this, and Jeff Bergman rounding out the cast with Foghorn Leghorn, and Fred Tatasciore in there as well as Yosemite Sam. I mean, like, everybody's just coming at it and bringing such class and such gravitas to these roles, and doing them justice. You have Eric Bauza taking over Bugs and Daffy, and honestly, the Daffy casting is inspired. And I told him this, a long time ago, but like, he's the best Daffy we've had since Mel Blanc, and I'm so glad that he's at the front and center of this movie. Was there any part of that was difficult to find somebody, or did everyone just kind of fit in place?
I think everyone fit into place. It's interesting. I used to work at Disney, and Disney has more of a policy of, we have official voices. This is the official modern voice of this character. And this is the person we use in all the, to record the doll voices and the shorts and the TV commercials and all of that. Warner Brothers is different. They don't have official voices for any of the characters. They re-audition everyone for every, they have an open audition for every project. And I think that's great, because you would sort of bump up against things at Disney where the sensibilities of each of these projects would be very different. Mickey Mouse for a preschool show is very different for, those Mickey shorts, those sort of wild comedy Mickey shorts they did. And
the Paul Rudish ones.
The Paul Rudish ones, yeah, which are wonderful. And they did use a different Mickey on those. But it, now there are so many different versions of Looney Tunes, and there's a preschool Looney Tunes as well, and there's, so you can sort of really figure out, who's going to be the best for this particular, who gets the sensibilities of this project. And a lot of these guys switch around, and they do different voices on different projects of the Looney Tunes cast. Somebody might be Elmer on this and Foghorn Leghorn on that, and switch. But those are the guys, who know all those so well. And Bauza is so incredible. He brings an energy and a nuance to this stuff. He's a fantastic mimic, but he's also an incredible actor, and so he can do the really pushed broad comedy. But in our movie, he was able to do that. We have some pretty subtle emotional scenes, as we're trying to sort of flesh out the characters, and so we can see a few more dimensions of them in this movie. So he does a great job with that. I kept feeling like he was doing with the voices what we were trying to do with the drawings, like almost trying to caricature, specific moments we loved from the classic shorts. There's specific references, but they're almost kind of caricatured. We were excited. Eric Bauza brought back screaming Bugs. That was something like Bugs would yell a lot in like the Clampett shorts, and we wanted that to be part of the shorts that we did, and he knew exactly what we were looking for with that.
What am I doing? Turn out those lights! Quiet! Now get this. If you're late one more time, you're fired. Get to work. Oh, I'm dying again.
Yeah, and also just the unhinged, Mel Blanc scream has gotten so much traction on social media.
I've seen that.
I've actually made a compilation of Eric's, right next to it, so that way people can see, oh, look, it's back. But you guys did it brilliantly. I love Eric's whole interpretation of those characters. And anytime Daffy says pork man to Porky, I just find it really funny and absurd. And, he is a pork man.
Yes.
So the music behind the tunes, Joshua Mosier and Carl Johnson came on following in the footsteps of Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin back in the day.
Yeah.
Like 2 composers. Like, did you knowingly do that, or was it just to break up the workload? And were they both working like at the same time?
Yes, but on different shorts. We knew we were making so many of these things that was going to be. We didn't want to spread our talent too thin. So we had both those brilliant composers, and it was kind of similar to the artists. Joshua is a younger guy, and Carl is a veteran who's worked on Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, and so you have these 2 different perspectives. Well, I don't know if they're different perspectives. They're just they have very strong love of the source material, and one of them is an expert who's been doing it for a long time, and the other one who is, he was eager to get out and prove himself that he could do it, and they're both brilliant and did just an incredible job, and that was one of the most fun parts of the job. I'm used to being very entrenched in the art. But being a producer on this, that I got to sit in with those guys and spot the shorts for music. I love it because I'm a real nerd for like song titles, and there's so much of Carl Stalling was quoting. He was a silent film accompanist, and so he would have to have this sort of deep bench of familiar song cues he would use, when playing a piano along with a silent movie. And that style comes through in the classic Looney Tunes shorts. You see a baby and they play "You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby," and it's like it's it's another joke on top of the joke. It's a humor operating on another level, and so I love that, and it was really fun to sort of rack your brains how you could do that on these shorts, but having to navigate what was public domain and what wasn't at the same time, because we don't have access to all the same songs they did in the classic era, but there's still a lot we could play with. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot for anyone who's sitting there going like, why aren't they playing a cup of coffee, a sandwich, and you for this? It's just like, well, we would have to pay a lot of money. But there were a lot of great, we were able to work with the Carl Stalling estate, allowed us to use, Powerhouse, and a lot of, there's a lot of really classic tunes we were able to dip into. So.
Perfect transition. So Joshua Mosier got to do the composition for the feature, The Day the Earth Blew Up. It features a wonderful Powerhouse segment that I was so fortunate to see composed in live and in person, thanks to you inviting me to that Evergreen studio where they...
you get to see them record live.
Yeah, it was incredible, and one of the highlights of my life, for sure.
For me too.
I could not believe the level of orchestra. Like, everybody was so talented that was behind this production, and the score just leaps off the screen.
And I'm glad you got to be a part of that. I remember, like, one of the most emotional parts of being involved with Looney Tunes was the first time we were recording an orchestra for. We used an orchestra for the main themes. Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, and Merrily We Roll Along, and What's Up, Doc, for the shorts. And being in the room and just feeling the music. I mean, it's so iconic, but to see it being created in front of you and to just feel it hitting you is such an incredible experience. And knowing that everybody in that room has a relationship with that music and is helping bring it to life. And I don't understand anything about music. Everything else about animation and art, I'm all, I'm very critical and fussy and analytical about, but music is this magic thing that I don't know anything about, and the composers and the musicians are just creating it, and and Josh in the booth will say like, I don't know, the woodwinds are maybe a little soft on that or whatever. And it's like, I don't know what you're hearing, but that's great. Like, you do what you need to do.
Yeah. They know their job. That's all that matters.
They know their job. Oh, and I wanted to say, like, the really cool things, I just want to put this piece of information out there.
Yeah.
The movie does have a live theremin player. I don't know if you were there on one of the days when they had it, but that's anytime you hear that classic sci-fi sound, it's not someone on a keyboard. We actually hired a professional theremin player to do that sort of stuff in the score. So
that was I was
really
not
exciting.
there that day. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool.
A live theremin. Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's as unique as the zither from The Third Man, I might say.
Yes, another iconic sound.
Rarely used instrument to generate
very specific,
emotional response.
Yeah.
Alex, I also wanted to talk about how great it is to have 2D back in cinemas with this film coming out March 14th, and getting something new with Looney Tunes made, but also getting it in theaters for the first time ever. How does that feel?
I mean, amazing. I mean, I can't even convey. To get to work on this project was an incredible, something I never thought I'd experience, and we didn't know for sure it was going to be theatrical when we started it, and when it became apparent that yes, this is at a level of quality where we think we can get a theatrical release with this, which was what we were shooting for, that level of quality, was just like, this feels like a once in a lifetime. I mean, I hope it's not, but it feels like this incredibly rare opportunity, because you never get to see 2D animation on the big screen, and for those of us who grew up, that was when you went to see an animated movie. It was knowing that it was hand drawn, and you could see the artist's hand in every scene. You never get to see that anymore. And when you're sitting in a theater watching it very much hits you how incredible that medium it is, and how much you miss it. It's just like, wow, I never do get to see this anymore. Where every drawing is meticulously labored over and made as perfect as possible. Nothing else feels like that. And knowing that we didn't have to put Looney Tunes through an interpretation, visually, it wasn't about trying to figure out, well, how do we make CG models feel like the Looney Tunes? It was how do we make drawings feel like drawings, and it's a more one-to-one adaptation, I think, stylistically. So I think it's really cool, and I think people will, go to see it and just realize, like, yeah, I think this is what Looney Tunes are supposed to feel like.
Yeah. No sports stars involved.
Yes, yeah. Well, you're keeping the focus on the characters, and just a few characters at that.
So that goes into my last question. What made it the perfect pair to put Daffy and Porky and Petunia into a movie together outside of a movie around Bugs and Elmer?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten that question a lot. And it's sort of interesting because I don't remember us debating it much. I think when we did the shorts, we loved making those Porky Daffy shorts. There's sort of less of a formula to those those cartoons can kind of go anywhere, and we felt like there were a lot of the funniest ones we made were with those characters. So when we had the opportunity to make a movie, I was like, well, yeah, we kind of feel like we've got this thing going with Porky and Daffy. And then this is something we've also mentioned. When you're going to tell a feature-length story with Looney Tunes characters, Porky and Daffy really do make the most sense. At least they did to us, because they're one of the few characters that don't have an antagonistic relationship. They're some of the only characters who weren't trying to murder and eat each other. They're buddies, and that's a relatable. You can build a relatable story around that. They're in a buddy movie. You want to see how they solve problems together, why they drive each other crazy, and how they drive each other crazy, and then also you learn why they need each other, and we wanted to do that. And I love classic comedians. I love Laurel and Hardy and Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and Abbott and Costello, and just the opportunity to tell a movie story like that, with a classic comedy team. Whereas I think, I won't say you couldn't tell a Bugs and Elmer movie story, but it's harder. You have to kind of reinvent the dynamic between those characters to break them out of predator prey. It would have to be about the characters calling some sort of truce or something, because I think it would probably be hard to watch an hour and a half of Elmer Fudd trying to make rabbit stew out of Bugs Bunny. There may be a way to do it, but this felt a little more natural. It's like we could start with the dynamic the way it is. Their dynamic is, and their relationship is different in a lot of. I think they're in like 30-something shorts they co-star in, and sometimes they're buddies, sometimes they're not. But there's a few key shorts, Baby Bottleneck, Porky Pig's Feet, You Ought to Be in Pictures. I love the relationship between those characters, and you see there's a tension under the surface. You see that they have a friendship, but they think about the world so differently, and how they attack obstacles is so different from each other that you do feel this little bit of tension that we thought, okay, we can exploit this into a whole story. So that's what we tried to do.
You did it magnificently, and it's such a joy to watch. I cannot wait for everyone to see it. The film hits nationwide March 14th. Now, there was a date change, so check your local listings. And a new trailer just went up today, which is doing some numbers. I hope that, that gets seen by people in theaters as well.
Yeah, see this movie in theaters. I don't know the next time you're going to get to see hand-drawn Looney Tunes animation in a theater is. So take advantage of this opportunity, for sure.
Support it. Because this also could indicate to Warner Brothers that there is a want for Looney Tunes in theaters, and then they'll go ahead and release Coyote vs. Acme. I know how much everyone wants that movie. So
who knows?
Who knows? The sky's the limit. So Alex, where can people find you online?
Oh, I'm on Instagram. I'm Alex Kirtoon, Kirtoon, on Instagram, and that's pretty much where I spend most of my online time.
Excellent. Yeah, go follow him for more. And I know you're doing some restorations with the Fleischer Studios.
Yes.
Projects,
well, a friend of mine does restaurate. I design some Fleischer merchandise for those new restorations. Because I love all old cartoons. So I love Betty Boop and Coco the Clown and Popeye. So
love it.
I love drawing those characters too.
That's amazing. So yeah, go check him out on Instagram, and you can follow us on Instagram at This Means Pod, and everywhere that you download podcasts, as well as our Patreon. So go check that out for some exclusives, and maybe there's a commentary around the entire film of Space Jam. You never know. As always, that's not all, folks, and keep it right here because there's a lot more Looney Tunes action coming your way.
Of course you realize this means, you know.
Yes, that's a very interesting Looney Tunes podcast. But do you want another Looney Tunes podcast?
You can never have enough Looney Tunes podcasts, Jordan.
Oh, really? Well, if you start listening to That's Not Quite All, Folks, a Looney Tunes podcast, you may get more than enough Looney Tunes podcasts. You may get too much Looney Tunes podcasts. But that's the exact kind of show that we run, Mark.
Yes, we are a show that has coexisted with this here. Of course, really, This Means Podcast show. Jonathan's a great guy. We've collaborated on each other's shows plenty of times. Though, I think this is the first time we've been on Jonathan's show. Hey,
Yes, even.
hey, we're on Jonathan's show. Oh, we can say whatever the hell we want. Oh, this is so much fun.
Hey, David Zaslav. No. Yes, each week we do 3 Looney Tunes cartoons. We cover them. Classics, new ones, Looney adjacent projects. Anything you want. It doesn't have to be 3. It doesn't have to be classic. It doesn't have to be anything. But we analyze the comedy mentalities, talk about gags, talk about voice acting, talk about all the elements that make great cartoons. And at the end, we give them anvil ratings, 1 to 5, because we feel like it. Sometimes they're accurate. Sometimes they are not accurate. Sometimes they're not meant to be taken seriously, especially if people who make them are listening to them.
And also, in every single episode of That's Not Quite All, folks, you'll hear the complete and incomparable ramblings of 2 people who have been friends for way too goddamn long.
Exactly. So, if you like that sort of thing, and if you like complete and utter tomloonery as far as the eye can see, you will probably really enjoy That's Not Quite All, Folks, a Looney Tunes podcast. Find it wherever podcasts are readily available.
Hello, this is Anthony from Anthony's Animation Talk, home of the Looney Tunes Review Project. Now, what is the Looney Tunes Review Project? It's a passion project of mine where I want to review every single Looney Tunes short ever made in the Golden Age. I'm not the first to do it. People have done it before, but not to this extent, where I go through each and every short in depth. So I'm going through each short year by year. I've got most of them on the channel. I've had to redo a few because of copyright issues with Warner Brothers, but all in all, once the project is all done, there'll be 1,000 reviews for 1,000 shorts, all in depth, filled with information, plus comments if there's any corrections to be made and that sort of thing. And on top of that, I do other videos as well, like reviewing new physical media releases and just other fun stuff. So come on over to the channel, check what it's all about, and join me on the journey to review every single Looney Tunes short ever made.